There you go. Hey guys, well, we just wanted to welcome you. If you're new, like we just got to meet a few of you. We're like totally pumped that you're here. Thanks for joining us in July, in the heat of the summer and everything that's going on. And we just love that we're able at Growmentum to just kind of provide this as a free resource. Hopefully you got some coffee. There's still money on the coffee card. So if you didn't get a coffee and you need an iced coffee this afternoon, feel free. I always just put it on there. When it's gone, it's gone. You'll have that awkward moment when the barista scans the code and says, sorry, dude. But I don't know when that's going to happen. So you can do that. But we're pretty pumped. In just a second, we're going to introduce our guest today, and Kay's going to kind of lead us through that conversation. But wanted to hit this one more time. We started 2 years ago, and this will be our third time, where we just thought, man, we just built some great relationships across this network of what we basically call executive level leaders. We don't always define that real clear, but that's okay. And just senior pastor, lead pastors. And so part of what we do every year in October is we just invite you guys to come to Vegas and hang out with us for a couple of days. It's part replenishment, part relationship building. And then this year, we think we've kind of upped the amperage on the content that we're going to be sharing with you guys as a part of our Thursday together. So basically you come in Wednesday, we have a great dinner, really nice dinner. If you're an adult beverage individual, there'll be plenty of that that's there. And you come in Wednesday night for that. And then Thursday is all day, kind of basically what we do here on the call, but live in person. So, and this year we're really excited. We've got Shane, who's a pastor here where I serve. We've got Mark Lee, who's in, he's in kind of Riverside area. Okay, that'd be the place people would know where he is, kind of that part of
Eastvale, Riverside County. Yep.
And then Lance Witt, who a lot of you know, and we work closely with in a good way, that you probably read some of his books. He shared with us last year via video, but he's going to be here in person. And then the guy we're going to introduce here in a second will be Rusty, will be with us as well. And so it's really a conversational day that we spend together. Still a small group. It'll be a large group, but not large enough that we will really have some conversations around the topics. And then Thursday night, we'll have a time at Topgolf. It's all part of it. And then Friday, there's some replenishment options. If you do bring your spouse, there's a lot of freedom for them to come or to go and to be a part of enjoying. There's a few things to do in Vegas, so they can go and do that and be a part of that. So really cool. We want to let you guys know that it is, people are starting to gradually register and be part of it. I'm going to say something as the guy in Vegas, and then I'm going to throw it to Kay. One is register, come hang out with us. Right? Like, just come be with us. We'd love to meet you in person. If we haven't already, do that. But I just want to really tell you guys, like, be preemptive, because it is Vegas, and some of the guys that are registering are not struggling, but you just need to get your accommodations and flight and all of that kind of locked in, because if you wait too long, it's not like you're flying to Rapid City, South Dakota. So you got to make sure you nail those things. So if you're planning on being here in October, but you tend to be a procrastinator, if I can encourage you at all, don't be that guy today. All right. So that's pretty much it. I'm going to throw it to Kay, and he'll introduce our guest, and then we're going to go along, and know that there is going to be a chance for you to do some Q&A at the end. So, be ready for that, and I'll be in the chat. And so we can hit some of that in the chat as well. Okay.
Yeah, we'll definitely mention that to write down notes or whatever, anything that comes connected to this topic, or anything even off topic, as Rusty has a lot of experience in leadership and navigating all things around this too. So please just write down some notes, and I think the Q&A session and time will be just as valuable as even the session that Rusty is going to share with us. So Rusty is actually my pastor. I get the privilege of being a part of the team, but also attend the church, and my family is a part of it and serves. And so we love being at Real Life Church in the Valencia area, with multi-campuses around the area. And Rusty's been there for 20 years, just celebrated 20 years. We were able to celebrate that together with him. And what an incredible legacy that he's had at the church. So he comes from the Midwest, and so I'll let him introduce himself from there, and came to California here, and has been part of Real Life Church for the last 20 years. But through that experience, man, he's navigated a lot of different things. And so we'll talk about it in a little bit too. The different crises that he's had to navigate even throughout his tenure at Real Life. And so we just thought that it'll be just a good pause and good time for us to be able to talk about leveraging criticism in leadership and that topic, as Rusty has some things to say about that. So, Rusty, please take it away. We're so glad that you're here and sharing your wisdom with the team.
Well, thanks for the invitation, Kay. It's so great to see so many new faces. It's great to see Caleb smoking a cigar. I've never seen that on a Zoom call, but I'm all for it. That's awesome. It's good to see Brennan and Lindsay and so many of you guys. So fun to be with you all. Looking forward to being with you all in October as well. I wanted to talk a little bit about something that every single one of us deals with. I know that whether you are a lead pastor or an executive pastor, whatever your role might be on a staff, you're going to deal with criticism. It's just the nature of the business. And it's true for everybody, really, especially with social media now. Everybody feels like they've got a megaphone. Everybody feels like they have the right to be heard. So they're going to take shots at whoever, and they're going to take shots at you. I think we all experienced this a lot during COVID. Whatever decision we made, whether it was to stay open or to close for a period of time, or no matter how long you did stay closed or stayed open, whatever, we all took heat for it. None of us could do the right thing when it came to not only COVID, but also George Floyd, also the riots, everything that went on. It was like, we either made somebody mad, privately or publicly or whatever. And so there was always criticism. But then there's just the normal day-to-day criticism. People on your staff criticize you. People criticize you to your face. People criticize you behind your back. And of course, there's people that criticize you from the church and from the community. We've had the privilege of seeing a lot of growth come to our particular church here in Southern California, but it brought with it a lot of heat from other churches in our community that didn't like our style, because we really go up hard after lost people, and we'll do whatever it takes, short of sin, as Groeschel would say, to reach them. And we really market towards that. And so because of that, we've had people take shots at us. We've had people write columns about us in our local magazine and newspaper. We had one church start in protest to us. Prince of Peace Lutheran Church started by putting out mailers and just to give you a little backstory, our church building looks like a movie theater. So we have theater seats and cup holders on the seats because we have a coffee house. So we expect people to buy coffee and have a place to sit it when they come in. So this was Prince of Peace Lutheran Church's publication as how they started their church. No cup holders, just Christ. That was their marketing tool. So I loved that. And I saved that one, actually.
Just pause right there. I don't think I've ever heard that happening. Like, could we actually use that as a church planning strategy? Like literally,
it really is incredible, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. And they didn't stay open long, but just the fact that they went after us and felt like there was an audience of people out there that were looking for a church without cup holders. And there's plenty out there. So anyway, that one still makes me laugh, but this, you're always going to take heat. You're always going to get criticism. I remember the first time that I noticed that pastors get criticized. I was a kid in my home church in Wichita, Kansas. And I remember my parents were talking to the pastor out in the lobby after the message. And, it's that line of people that come by, hey, great job, good to see you, that kind of thing. While we're talking to him, a woman comes up and her hands are wet, and she grabs his suit coat and begins to dry her hands on his jacket and says, "You didn't put any towels in the women's bathroom." And I thought, wow. Well, I mean, first of all, he's not going in the women's bathroom, or there's another issue. And why was that his responsibility? But I learned in that moment, it doesn't matter what it is or where it happens, it always makes its way to you, and you end up taking the heat for it. So even though I learned that at a young age, and even though I had been cautioned by pastors for years that, we're going to take heat, we're going to get criticized, I still wasn't prepared for it. When I became the senior pastor out here in California, it always starts with a great amount of excitement and everybody's happy and everything's going well. And then suddenly the negative begins to come out. For me, it was comparison to the previous guy. Well, you're not as charismatic as the last guy. You don't teach like the last guy. Even a few people said you're not as good looking as the last guy. You take the heat. But what I learned was I don't handle criticism well at all. I always took it way too personal. And I love what Carey Nieuwhof says, that we should take it serious, but not personal. But that's a fairy tale in my mind, because I always take it personal. And the problem is I tend to believe that their criticism is Jesus' criticism. So if somebody leads our church and says, you're not exegetical enough, I think, ooh, maybe God's saying that to me. If someone leaves our church and says it's not spirit-filled enough, oh, maybe God's saying that to me. And I think you know what I'm talking about. You do this too. You assume that people's criticism is also the Lord's criticism as well. So I've really had to do a lot of work with with therapists, a lot of reading, a lot of meditation time to kind of figure out where is God in all this and how should I handle criticism. So I want to give you, it's going to sound like it's going to take forever, but I want to give you 9 things that I've learned about criticism. And I think we got some slides on this as we go, but we'll jump in as we go. Here's the first one. Criticism is unavoidable. As much as we tend to think that there will come that magic moment where everything is up and to the right, you've right-sized the plane, flying in the right direction, it's on autopilot, and everybody's happy, there's always going to be turbulence. And I heard somebody say that if Jesus received criticism, you better believe we're going to receive it as well. And he did. He received it all the time. You know this. I mean, he got criticized by the Pharisees because he ate with people like John the Baptist, and criticized by the Pharisees because he didn't eat with them. And so, it was one of those, you can't make everybody happy. And I think that we all believe that. But at some point in our ministry, we think that ministry is making people happy. And when somebody's not happy, we feel that as a personal problem. Henry Cloud says it this way, that when criticism happens or when a crisis happens, we tend to think, first of all, it's personal. We're the only ones that's ever dealt with this. That it's pervasive. In other words, everybody feels this way, and that it's permanent, that it will always be this way. But the quicker you can realize that those things aren't true, the easier it will be for you to get over it. I think the problem I had for years was I just didn't anticipate it. I just assumed that the next sermon series everyone would love. I assumed that the next capital campaign everybody would love. And it took me a while to figure out not everybody's going to be in on this. Second thing, you can't control what people say, but you can control your response. And what I've learned is, people, they're going to say what they want to say. I think Gene Apple told me one time, people are going to leave. You don't get to choose if people leave your church, but you do get to choose why. So if people are going to criticize, they're going to say it, but you can control what your response is going to be. So what I've learned is I have to have, there is a boundary on criticism. And that is, I'll allow you to criticize my judgment or even my style or my method. And maybe it worked, maybe it didn't work. Maybe we shouldn't have added or canceled that service. Maybe we shouldn't have done that capital campaign. But I'm going to call foul when it comes to criticizing my character, because I work really hard to have character and to be a person of integrity. Larry Osborne, in one of his books, and you should just read them all, says that when people lose one of the 3 P's, that's when they get upset: position, preference, or prestige. And I've just noticed this from members to volunteers to staff people. If you start moving their cheese a little bit, if you take away their position or preference or prestige, they get upset. And what they tend to do is use sin language. They say things like, well, you're just a greedy person, or the latest buzzword is, and it's warranted in some cases, you're a narcissist. You're an abusive leader. When really it's not so much about that as it is, you lost your position, or you lost your preference, or you lost your prestige. So what I'll allow people to do is be critical, But at some point I'll say, I'm going to draw the line there because I'm not going to let you attack my character. And you can talk to my elders and they'll vouch for me on this. And I didn't make this decision alone. You may not like the decision, but it's not a sin issue. It's a preference issue. So allowing, your response to be based upon, I'm going to draw the line there. Here's the third thing. Behind every criticism is hurt. Ricky Jenkins is a pastor out in the Coachella Valley, told me this amazing story of he took over a church out there that had a pastor before him had a moral failure that ended up on the front page of the local paper, and it devastated the church, and people were heartbroken, and as any of those situations are. He said, I came in and took over the church and things were going well, and somebody got mad at me about something, and as they're yelling at me in the lobby, I realized they're not mad at me. They're mad at the former lead pastor. But they're just seeing me as taking that role, and they're thinking I'm going to let them down at some point as well. And a lot of times, the thing that people are upset about with you is really not the issue. Or as we've heard before, their issue is never the issue. And hurt people hurt people. It took me a long time to figure this out. In the early days of real life, because we went through a major stylistic change, and a lot of people that came to real life had come from Shepherd of the Hills. And so they wanted to really just create Shepherd North in our particular community. And so when that didn't happen, when we weren't going to do the Christmas plays and Easter cantatas and all of the different particular ministries, people got really upset. And so I would go to coffee with them to win them over. And so I would often, get in these like almost screaming matches in coffee shops trying to prove my point. And inevitably, they'd leave the church anyway. Now, you're thinking, of course they would, because their pastor's screaming at them inside Starbucks. Well, that is certainly part of it. But it's also the fact that I wasn't really listening to them. I was just saying what I wanted to say. So in other words, I was trying to win the argument, but in turn, I lost the person. So what I've learned now is to sit down with people and ask, tell me what you're upset about. Tell me why that bothers you. And, 3 questions in, their reasoning begins to fold like a house of cards, but you begin to at least peel back the onion and figure out what they really want. Kind of learned this the hard way with one couple we were pretty close to when we first moved out here, really liked them, had a lot in common. They were real active in the church. And she would just criticize me all the time about message depth and the church's depth. And we, I just need more. And eventually they left the church. Now, what happened through that process was I kept trying to appease her by I'd add more Greek words. I'd do more exegetical teaching. We even hired a guy that was kind of our John Ortberg to Bill Hybels.
Can you give me a Greek word right now, Rusty? Can you give me one like right now that you added? Like something you learned? Because I know you're a Greek scholar at this point.
Yeah. It's pronounced hero and not gyro. So that was a big one. I'm kidding you.
And it didn't work.
I don't even know. I don't even know now. But we did everything to placate them. They left anyway, and they ended up going to a charismatic church. And I thought, that's really interesting. So when she said depth, she didn't mean intellectual depth. She meant experiential. And a lot of times, I don't even know what it is they're upset about and what it is that they're really hurt about until I ask more and more questions. And now when somebody says, I need something deeper, I'll say stuff like, what does deep look like to you? What does that mean to you? And a lot of times I'm trying to answer a question they're not asking, or I'm giving an answer to something they haven't even thought about. So anyway,
Rusty, when you talk about that, there's a question around how do you create empathy for the criticizer, and maybe even whether you have it later or not, maybe this will be a good time to talk about the burp stuff that you've talked about before with me.
Yeah, that's really good. That came from a church consultant named Hayden Shaw, who I highly recommend his work. But he said, people are a lot like babies. They process change difficultly. And so like with a baby, they need to be patted on the back and let them burp because they're processing change as the food's going through their system. And for a lot of people, it's the same thing. You just need to pat them on the back and say, they're there now. and let them burp, let them say what their problem is. And a lot of times they don't need to have their way, they just need to have their say. And so asking them what the issue really is, or tell me what you would do differently, or I think well, that's a rabbit trail I won't go down. But basically, just the more questions you ask, the better off you are. When you start making statements, then they feel like they have to defend themselves. But when you ask questions, they get a chance to explain themselves. And I found that brings a lot of empathy. And sometimes, you know, at the end of it, I can say something like, well, I can see why you'd feel that way. And you've given me a lot to think about. And I'm going to process that for a while. Let's meet again. Would you look for this, or would you volunteer in this area and see what you think? A lot of that really goes a long way for people. Okay. Yeah, Kay, jump in at any point, but I'm going to move on. Number 4. Not all criticism is equal in value. I mean, you know this. Like if you're a quarterback and your offensive lineman's telling you something, that's one thing. If it's the dude up in the 5th row screaming at you, you don't care about it. And I had to, it took me a while to figure out, just because they're a large giver, or just because they've been around since the beginning, doesn't always mean their criticism is worth listening to. I think about the distinction between these two things. There's some people with a critical eye, and there are some people with a critical spirit. And for a long time, I yielded to the people with critical spirits, just feeling like my job was to make them happy. I think of 2 specific people, both very involved in our church and both incredibly generous people. One of which picked his battles. He would pull me aside once a year with a criticism. And the other guy, every time we met, he had a criticism. And it took me a while to figure out, that guy's got a critical spirit. This isn't an issue of me fixing one thing. He's always going to find another thing. And so learning, you know, who are the people I really need to listen to in those moments? Sometimes, you know, you just have to say, I love you, but I don't feel called to respond to this criticism. One of my favorite ways to respond to a negative email, and I heard this secondhand, that Joby Martin said, which is, you're probably right. That's it. You know, a quiet answer or a short answer turns away wrath. Long emails are never dealt with long emails back, but just, you're probably right, and leave it at that. I had a former staff member who left our staff 10 years ago, and just, you know, a few months ago decided to write me a long scathing email about all I did wrong 10 years ago. Thought, man, I don't even remember half the stuff you're talking about. But I just responded with, you're probably right. That wasn't enough for him. So he sent another one. And I said, you're probably right. And I could tell it was infuriating him, which made me kind of happy. But at the same time, I don't need to engage in that. It's not really worth it. I wasn't able to see the entire question that came up from Tony.
Hey, Rusty, real quick, and I'll get you up, Tony. Like, one of the things I was thinking about, you're there, I don't remember who it was, but do you ever just completely ignore it? Like, do you ever take emails and go, I'm not even going to respond? Would you ever even recommend that, like a non-response?
Well, that's a good question. Typically, if it's an email, well, they know me. If there's a lot of emails that come to my assistant because they just get the public email address, and that stuff will usually be passed on to somebody else that can handle it better. I do get letters still that are anonymous. Of course, I can't respond to those, and I don't. But if it's from somebody that I know, I'll typically try to call them and follow up. But there again, if it's somebody that I feel like, man, they got skin in the game here. There's somebody that they've got a critical eye, not a critical spirit. Yeah, I'll respond to that. But there are some that you just, whatever.
I was thinking about a lot of these guys on the call, like we also, over time where you serve, where I serve, some of these guys as well, we have the benefit of scale, right? So we have hundreds, if not thousands of people, whereas there's guys on these call that are dealing with hundreds, right? Where criticism is on a very much more of an intimate scale, right? And so I guess this is more of a comment than anything. I think what you're saying is so powerful because the smaller it is, unfortunately, the more criticism can not only impact the leader, but probably also impact the direction of the organization if that criticism becomes cancerous, right? You have somebody criticizing real life, okay, whatever, right? Move on. But some of these guys, it's a lot, they sit in a little bit more of a tenuous situation.
That's a great point. And that's so true. If you're in a church of 100 and, somebody's kind of freaking out about something, that's going to have a little bit more of an impact, and probably sitting down with them with a witness as well. I tend to not go alone, because you want the ability to say, there was somebody else there, and that's not what I said, or whatever. That can kind of quiet it down. But speaking of scale, the longer you're there, the more you begin to figure out what's a big thing, what's not. For those of us that were David Letterman fans back in the day, he had that bit where he and Paul would play this game of "Is This Anything?" where they'd raise the curtain and somebody be, juggling cats, or, doing something with a chainsaw or whatever. And they would say, "Is that anything?" No, it's not anything. I feel like every day, that's my game. Every data piece I get, every email I get, "Hey, did you hear this happen?" I'm like, is that anything? Do I need to respond to it? And the longer you're there, the more you begin to figure out, what do I need to deal with? What do I not?
Rusty, you just said it as a side comment, but I think it is a really important principle that I've learned from you over the years too, is take a partner wherever you go, especially when you're navigating these kind of conversations. Can we do it alone? Sure. But at the same time, so many times taking that partner has paid off on the other side of it because of X, Y, Z reason, right? So that's an incredible point.
Yeah, and you can be strategic too about the partner you take. Sometimes you want to get somebody where they don't feel like they're being ganged up on. And I'll even ask them, "Hey, I'd like to have somebody else sit in with us. Do you feel comfortable if it's this person or if it's that person?" Sometimes they'll pick their own person, which I'm okay with, as long as it's somebody else that can validate what was said there. That helps out a lot. But just being able to not be alone in those situations keeps you from walking out of there and you both heard different things. Did I answer Tony's question?
Question was,
okay.
He said,
okay.
He's good.
Okay. Let's see. Don't be crazy critical yourself. We saw this a lot during COVID, where people would take the stage and they would rip on other churches that chose to do something different than they did. I would just encourage you to take the high road and not get into that, because you will really stand out as a shining star in your community if you're not the one throwing stones. We've even gone so far as to, we'll pray for other churches during communion sometimes. I'll reference other pastors in our community and highlight good things that they do. We even did a tithing series where we talked about the need to give to your local church. And I said, if you don't feel like you can give here, let me tell you 4 or 5 churches in the community I trust you can give there. Which I have a buddy that tried that, and the guy wrote a check to another church and gave it to that church in the offering. So it can backfire on you, but I think you just want to lead with grace, so that when people get critical of you, whether it's in the church or outside the church, you're the one that everybody says, "Man, they are so pro other churches," or "They're so pro, other people." They're not always in the critical game, and that's not just from stage. That's also just in your staff meetings. And, we've always said at our staff, just, hey, if somebody calls from another church and they need something, you drop everything and help them out, because this is not a competition. So we're always going to have things that we think are funny about other churches, or tweets that somebody made. We think, did you see this? And we laugh about it. That's fine. But you don't want to be that critical person that's always taking shots at others, because then you're fostering this culture of criticism. Number 6, use criticism to your advantage. I've found that it can kind of be a bit of a game where I'm trying to mine through what it is they said to find that 5% of something I can learn. And even being able to say, "Thank you, you're making me better," or "You've given me a lot to think about," and circling back later and letting them know that you have thought about it, and prayed about it, and you appreciate that. It blows people's minds that you would do that. And a lot of times with social media, if somebody's taking shots at me, I'll follow up and say, "Hey, I'd love to talk to you about this in person." Now, often they never respond, but just be able to use it to your advantage, to be able to be the person that kind of washes feet in that moment. I heard a pastor say one time that he always assumed that everything would be up and to the right. Now he's learned that criticism is just part of his own sanctification. It's just God chiseling away, moments of arrogance or ego or whatever it is. Dave Stone, I heard him tell this story recently. It's a totally new approach to criticism I never thought of. He said over the years he was pastoring at Southeast in Louisville, he received so many negative letters or emails. He said, I started saving them. I'd print them out, I'd put them in a file, and I'd hang on to them. And 3 or 4 times a year, I'd go back and reread them because it would remind me how God led us through that time. Because, when you get that negative email, you think, oh, everybody thinks this. This is the way it will always be. And when you get past it and you're on to the next crisis or the next issue, you realize, hey, God really led us through that. And sometimes rereading that negative email will really help you do that. I remember I got one. It was delivered to me in my mailbox at home. It wasn't even mailed. So somebody knew where I lived. They typed something out. They referenced something in a newspaper that we had advertised and took shots at me and put it in my mailbox. So I was kind of freaked out by it because I thought, man, they know where I live, and they put it in my mailbox. But to go back and read that once in a while reminds me that we made it through that, and I didn't wake up with my dog's head in our bed or get killed or anything like that. So that use criticism to your advantage. Number 7. It often comes because we haven't clearly explained the why. We think about church all the time and other people don't. They just think, I didn't like that. And then they fire off an email or make some kind of comment. And we do this at restaurants and hotels. I didn't like this. This doesn't make any sense. And then when you talk to somebody behind the scenes, you figure out, oh, this is after a lot of brainstorming and thinking and think tanks and all that kind of thing. What I've learned is we tend to spend about 20% of our time explaining the why and 80% of the how. And good wisdom is to flip that around, to spend about 80% on the why and then get into the how. Don Wilson, I heard say one time that he would use his elders meetings to do part business and part dreaming. And he said, that decision might not come for 6 months, but it's in those moments that I'm letting the elders in on a decision that I'm thinking about that we don't have to take action on. That way they get to kind of stew on it a little while as well. So just taking a lot of time with your staff, especially, and even church, to talk about, boy, this is a big issue in our community, and leave it at that. Or have you noticed that the suicide has gone up or drug rates have gone up or whatever, and kind of just leave it at that. Let people start marinating on that or praying about it, or what would God have us to do? And with your staff, and we got this big issue we're trying to solve or we're trying to fix. And, I'd love to hear, have us all praying about it or whatever. And now people are involved in the why before you ever get to the how. Number 8 is how you respond to criticism equals how healthy you are. It's kind of a gas gauge for our heart. When people, I always know when it's time for me to take a vacation because I get more sarcastic with people. I get angrier in the lobby. I just can't handle it as well. And it's usually because I'm tired or because I've just run out of grace for people. One of my favorite stories is from our buddy Shane, who I think was with you last month. And he talked about, and Lee, you probably remember this, maybe we were there for this. He was in the lobby right after COVID, and some woman came up and was just ripping him for closing the doors for a while. And he said he just lost it to the point where the security guy said to him afterwards, I didn't know whether to protect you or protect her because you were getting so angry. That's just a moment you realize, I'm probably not in a good space right now. So I need to take some time away or do some things to replenish. Last thing, and then we'll do questions if you want. We need to lead out of blessing rather than for a blessing. The pattern we see in scripture is God blesses people, then he gives them something to do. And we typically flip that around and think, I'm going to do this for God, and then they're going to bless me with their positivity. And that's really the wrong expectation. we've been blessed with this opportunity to lead people the way that we do and from where we get to do it. And so let's just start with that. We're already blessed. They're going to have some criticism. The sheep are going to bite sometimes. That's just the way that it is. I'll never forget this. I heard this years ago, and I have just kept it with me. Most of us walk out on stage wondering, do you like me? And we preach with that in mind, or we lead with that in mind, when really the congregation's asking, do you like me? So starting from a position of, I've been blessed to do this job, I get to lead you, and I love you. You're not all going to like it. Not all of you will stay, but this is the vision God has for us, and we're going to keep moving forward. And I get my validation from God, not from all of you thinking I'm awesome. Will make things a whole lot easier. If I can reference one book as I wrap up, the book Unoffendable. Don't even know the guy that wrote it. It's a brilliant book. This guy used to work in Christian radio, so he dealt with all kinds of criticism. It's really funny, and it's really helpful too. I'm going to pick up a copy of that, and I get no royalties on that. That's just free of charge for whoever wrote that. All right. Okay.
That's awesome, Rusty. Well, I mean, obviously all of these points and truths are embedded in a lot of experience, a lot of different things that you've gone through over the years. I'm actually reminded of, I think I told you a story about this marketing guy in France that was in charge of Apple's marketing there, customer service relations and those things. And basically, when you're faced with criticism, or when you're faced with this opposition, a customer service comes in and says, "Hey, this is not working." You actually have two options. You can take two tokens. One token is, "Oh, it's not a big deal," and the other token is, "It's the end of the world." Meaning, if you take one token and you say, "Well, that's not a big deal. I mean, just you can buy another one, or you can, like whatever." Or if you take "Oh, it's the end of the world. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Let's make that right for you." Well, what he says about that is, whatever token you take, the other individual that's criticizing will take the other token. So meaning, if you take "it's the end of the world," they're like, "It's actually not that big of a deal. It's okay. We'll work it out." But if you take "it's not that big of a deal," they're going to have to take the other token, which is, "Man, do you not see the problem in this? Like, how can you not even listen to me or take me seriously," or those type of things. And I've seen even that principle play out even in the church, and even in, like your relationship with your kids. Your kids, come back home after curfew, and they treat it like it's not a big deal. And then you've got to take the other token and say, "It is a big deal. It's the end of the world." Or if they come back and say, "I'm so sorry. I mean, I feel so guilty." And then you have to take the encouragement side, right? So it's the two tokens. Rusty or anybody else, have you guys experienced that that perspective? Rusty, I think you have as well.
Oh, I definitely have. And typically it comes up when somebody comes up to me and says, "Hey, I called so-and-so and they never called me back." I immediately take that's the end of the world. I don't threaten firing the person, but I take it so seriously that they think I'm going to. And then they typically, "Oh, it's okay. It's okay. It's okay." Because that's a big value of ours, right? We really want to have great customer service. And I do take it seriously. And I let them know that as well, rather than, "Oh, I'm sure they were busy," and let it slide.
And yet at the same time, if you took the other token in a defense for, "Well, there's a reason why, we've been really busy with, church and, this camp and all that stuff," and then they're going to still have to take the other token. So it's an interesting principle as well. So, all right, what other questions do you guys have? Feel free to unmute and ask. This is an incredible time to be able to ask any questions that you might have with Rusty about criticism and his topic and what he presented, but also anything else. And go.
I actually did.
Ben.
I actually did scribble a question. So I legitimately, I'm not just trying to fill the audience.
Well, let's Ben is unmuted.
Oh,
Let's see
Ben's
if
in there.
Ben has
Got it.
something.
Yeah. Rusty was just curious if you have any sort of rule of thumb for sort of a critical mass of questions. So in other words, I tend to get a lot of one-off criticisms, but if I get like 4 or 5 that are on the kind of same topic, now I'm starting to pay attention. But I don't know if there's sort of a rule of thumb. A congregation of 1,000, if I get 20 criticisms, then I should pay attention. Anything like that?
That's a great question. Kay and I have talked for years about creating Moneyball for churches, and this would be one of the analytics we'd look at right here. But pardon my dog barking in the background. It's lunchtime for him. I think of something I read in Leadership Pain by Sam Chand. He said, I don't care what size your church is, 10% of them are devils. And so you think about that, your church is 600, 60 people, they're just always going to be upset about something. So I'm not looking for it to be 61 people upset about it. I'm looking for it to be somebody besides the devil that's upset about it. So if I look at those people and think, yeah, you're part of that 10% that's always, cantankerous about something, I'm probably not going to think much about it. But for the people that come to me with something, I think, no, you're a little more thoughtful. Now it's beginning to build up a little bit. Now I'm gonna think about this, or I might bring it up to our staff or to our elders or to a group of people I trust and say, is this anything? And see if it has any traction to it. A lot of things go away quickly. One of the best pieces of wisdom I ever got in ministry was the cycle for a crisis in your church is typically 2 weeks, because people are too selfish. They have to get back to their own lives and their own problems. And so the people that are wearing you out on social media or even in the lobby, that usually goes away in 2 weeks. In fact, we've actually put it on the calendar and said, give it 2 weeks and we'll count it down, and it goes away. It's amazing. So if it sticks around longer than 2 weeks, if there's more of the 90% that are talking about it rather than just the 10%, then I'm interested.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, that's great.
Rusty, the question I had was really more around, it's sort of criticism, but maybe we're going on a tangent, so we have to do a different call. But I just thought, and maybe you covered this a little and I didn't catch it, but is there criticism that we invite by the way we process and communicate decisions, is what I wrote down. And you did talk about that a little.
Yeah.
Bit. How do you take criticism, process it, all the stuff that's gold that you're giving us, but also kind of go, not only is there criticism correct, but like almost do a dissection of where did that criticism, what's the origin story of that criticism? Because I think as leaders, sometimes the way we process or communicate things can actually bring that on.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think that, a lot of it is, we've spent 6 months thinking about it and read 10 books and surveyed 10 churches that are doing it and walk in and say, here it is. And we haven't allowed people to process it. I think we underestimate the value of giving them time to think about the why. But I also think we haven't been clear about what we expect from people. And what I mean by that is, if I come into a meeting and there's, 10 people in the room and I say, I got 5 things I want us to talk about, 3 of which I want your input on, 2 of which you have no chance in talking me out of. Well, now they have clarity as to, okay, well, so that's going to be an all skate and we're going to do it. Or this is you get my opinion and I may have a chance to sway your mind in that. That just gives people a lot of clarity into, is this a hill you're going to die on, or is this you just thinking out loud?
That's helpful. Because I was thinking last week, I had a conversation with a pastor who made a decision. It wasn't the wrong decision, I guess. I mean, still TBD, right? But, I was on a text thread and I said, hey, make sure you process this with your team. This is a person, if you're a thinking wavelengths individual, this is a person that's pretty far right on the wavelengths. And so he said, yeah, I'll do that. I said, this is a really great opportunity for you to do that. And so he didn't really process it. He just told them, which again is fine. Like, again, I have no problem with him making the decision, but like you just said, I would have loved for him to walk in and go, here's the decision. Now let's process the implications, the unintended consequences, etc. Right. And we haven't talked at length today about criticism from our own team. You did touch it a little bit, but I think the way we communicate those decisions is huge as far as how much criticism we get in-house.
Yeah, that's so good. And plus, you also are educating your team as to how safe it is for them to criticize you. I think it's Stanley that says, loyalty publicly allows you to leverage privately. So, having safe spaces where people can say whatever they think, but then they're all in as they walk out. We have a unified voice, goes a long way. But we've all seen this where the guy shoots somebody down publicly and lets them have it for even thinking that way. Well, they're probably not going to speak up again. And maybe they shouldn't, but it's still probably a better thing to do behind the scenes.
And I love the idea of like, if you want to collaborate, but it's not a pseudo collaboration. So if you've already made the call, you just mentioned like, here's the 3 things I've already kind of decided. They may or may not be, but at least they understand the perspective of the conversation.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I'll tell you one thing that has helped me is to also say, like, if we make a decision and we communicate it to the congregation or even to the staff, just to say, hey, this may not work, but we're going to go for it. And then we'll bring it back and we'll review it. Because in the early days, I felt like everything had to be a success and we had to do it until Jesus returned. But, sometimes you have to kill your Sunday night service. Sometimes you have to change your service time. Sometimes you have to unplug Awanas or whatever it is. But, when we act like the method that we've adopted is biblical and cannot be altered, well, then we put ourselves in a really bad position. So sometimes, we'll say, hey, we're going to try this for 6 weeks. It may bomb, but it may be awesome. So let's just see how it goes. Give me some feedback. And here we go. And then now people are like, okay, I'll give them permission to try that. And I love the fact that you're a risk taker rather than getting up and saying, Jesus told me this last night in a dream. And so we're going to do this until he returns. Now you've painted yourself into a corner.
Yeah. Let's beta it. Let's experiment for sure.
Yes.
One thing I want to share as we come to a close is that Rusty has this incredible resource called Leading Through Crisis. And he's actually got a coupon code Gromentum for us on that. And it's basically a course, an online course with a whole bunch of different topics. Do you want to highlight anything on this, Rusty, as I just kind of show those topics?
Yeah, and you referenced this earlier, Kay. I'd never set out to be the weeping prophet Jeremiah, but boy, over the last 10 years, it seems like that's what we dealt with from. I just go through this list here: moral failures, financial crisis, and some of you will find this funny, but the death of Kobe Bryant was a huge deal for our people. How do you honor somebody that's not honorable? We've had people on staff deal with various sides of the racial political tension, but also suicide. We've had 2 people on staff die by suicide. We've had a school shooting. Just all those kind of things that you think, boy, that'll never happen to me. That's what I thought. And we did a few things proactively to prepare for some of these that really helped us out, even like handling the press, all that kind of stuff. It can really help you out. So hopefully it's a course that can help you. For God forbid, if you go through those situations, you're ready. But some of these are things that you're going to deal with anyway, like managing the crisis in you, crisis on staff members colliding, people leaving your church. That's just a given. But we'll give you the code and everything there.
Yeah. And what's the interesting thing about crisis is that a lot of times, it's like, okay, I don't have that crisis right now. And yet at the same time, one of the best things that you can do is to be able to learn from other people's crisis, right? Like we say that all the time, right? So if that's the case, I mean, what is it that we can actually proactively learn and the process and the thinking around that? And then I will tell you this from somebody who's watched these videos, is that there's way, way more than that. There's all these leadership nuggets that Rusty and Fred and others are pouring into there as well. So I think it'll be a helpful resource. What's going to happen is that the link will actually even go out in the recap video, and it'll go out to everybody that couldn't make it, that was on vacation and on the lake. Man, I got so many late pictures today that can't make it today. And they'll all get it as well. You'll get it as well. And so what we're doing is we're going to give you a one video to be able to just kind of even be a teaser and just check it out and see what it's like. And some of these actually would be even really great. If you've ever thought about, hey, staff meeting, what do I, can I show something at a staff meeting and they'll have a discussion around that? Sometimes it's a really, really great platform, because a lot of times we get the text, hey, so what should I do in my staff meeting? You got any, leadership talk or something like I can do? And these could be serving as something like that. So want to put that, anything I'm missing there, Rusty, on that?
No, that's huge. I'll just highlight what you said there about it's always better to be prepared proactively. It's another Larry Osborne principle. He said, if you haven't had a moral failure, you will on your staff. So when that happens, half your board's going to want to bring justice and the other half's going to want to bring grace. So decide ahead of time. So we did that. It helped us out in a huge way, and we share all that in here. So it's all there.
All right, Lee.
Yeah, we'll put that on the email that goes out later tonight or first thing in the morning, along with the code that's there. And so that's awesome. So yeah, appreciate you guys jumping on today. Those of us who are not at the lake, unfortunately, or at the beach or in Hawaii, or as Derek would say, on sabbatical. We appreciate you being here. As we always say, guys, like one of our values at Growmentum is just to connect people into a network. And so there are things that we do. We work with Rusty. We work with churches all over the country. A lot of you on here we're working with, but that's our invitation to you if you'd like to have deeper conversation, but that's not a prerequisite. We believe that we just want to form a network of like-minded individuals and leaders and learn together. And things that are powerful, like what Rusty shared today, and his investment in us is big. As always, 2 reminders. One is we'll send out an invite to the next call in August. They run about every 4 weeks on Wednesday at 11 a.m. Pacific. If you know people who are not on the call that you need to invite, feel free to invite them. Just know that as they get invited, or if you're new today and you got invited and you want to make sure that you get the official invites, calendar invites, text reminders, make sure you fill out the form for that. And we'd love to see you in Vegas in October. Rusty will be here. He'll be sharing a deeper dive into some of the stuff that he talked about today, and he'll be hanging out with us a little bit too. So if you haven't registered, booked your hotel, what are you waiting for? Come and be with us. It'll be great weather. It'll be K weather in October. It'll be like perfect. So you'll love it. All right. Thanks so much, guys. Thanks, Rusty.